Thanks, everybody. It did solve the problem, so Venerable Robina will join us shortly. Yes, Venerable Robina, there were a couple of right before the break. This is from Zoom. Is there any other way of thinking about karma rather than negative and positive? I ask because the word negative triggers fear, aversion, and positive triggers attachment. Or did the Buddha teach it this way because that's the only framework in which we can relate?
Bring the camera up to me. Why is it like that, Chris? It's normally straightforward. The camera in the front. He's working on it. Oh, is he really? Okay. Well done. Okay, there we go. Look at that. Okay. Okay, now think about this. This is the answer. So if we are talking Christianity or Islam, which are the usual views we have of religion, there's a creator, and the creator is the boss. And the creator invented everything, invents the rules, invents the laws, and runs the show. So that question suits a creator. So if Buddha is not a creator, doesn't assert a creator, but is a person like Einstein, who uses his intelligence to observe the world, in his case, observe the human mind. And then whatever he's come up with is coming from his direct experiential observation. So Buddha's view of the mind is coming from his own observation of the mind, and what he's done is present how the mind works. So it's not as if he made up the idea of, delusions and virtues just to make you scared or make you something. This is his view of reality, that the mind is made up of deluded states of mind, misconceptions that causes suffering, are the voices of ego, and then the mind has also got the valid states of mind, the virtuous states of mind. And that basically being a Buddhist is using your mind, getting concentration and working with ethics every day and getting more and more familiar with your mind and identifying attachment, identifying anger, identifying jealousy, identifying depression, identifying all these unhappy states, seeing them more and more clearly, ever more subtly, hearing the way they made up conceptual stories and slowly arguing with them and eventually removing them utterly from the mind, which means you're then practicing virtue and growing your virtue until eventually you've perfected your virtue and you've rid the mind of all the delusions. That's the meaning of a Buddha. It's Buddha's observation. That's what he's observed. So our job, if we like, just like, I always quote this, I say this often, I tell this often, in New Zealand, this fellow said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Which is a perfect question if you're talking about a creator religion. Who revealed, someone above Buddha, revealing it to him. That's what it is. That's the Christian view. That's not the Buddha's view. I said, would you ask Einstein, who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? Because and of course we laughed. He laughed because that's absurd. Because we know Einstein used his mind and observed reality and then presented his findings. That's the Buddha. So if you're following Einstein, he's not forcing you, this is the point, he's not forcing you to believe what he says. He doesn't want you to believe that 1 + 1 is 2. That's bizarre. He says, these are my findings. This is the methodology. If you want to also come to the same conclusion, then follow this thinking. That's what you're doing as a Buddhist. So Buddha is either right or wrong. The mind is either like that or it's not. And guess who's going to find out? You. That's the approach. So in that question, am I hearing you say that you get attached when good things happen and fearful when bad things happen? Well, then that's samsara, isn't it? But we have to change that. That's the point. That's the samsaric view. So we look into the mind and we're going to see attachment and anger and jealousy and pride. Simple words. We have to see how they cause us pain. Buddha's saying these are the source of our pain. Having these thoughts themselves, having these views themselves in response to the lousy boyfriend or whatever it is, or the beautiful cake. The cake and the boyfriend are just the catalysts that trigger these states of mind, which are the source of the suffering. That's what we need to look into and investigate. And when we see that they are the source of our suffering, we're sick of suffering, then we follow the Buddhist method for how to get rid of them. Because he says that's what we can do. We can get rid of suffering and its causes. That's the approach. So I hope that helps. Buddha's describing reality. Buddha is describing how things exist. You don't have to believe him. It's foolish. Buddhism, Einstein is not saying you must believe me. That's how we think of religion. It's so intense in us. It's so instinctive to think we have to believe it because it's coming from on high. That's superstition for the Buddha. Not like that at all. Okay, what else? Something else?
There was another question that followed the discussion about spirits.
Yeah, good.
How would we know if someone else is possessed by a suffering being, and how could we help someone who is possessed?
Yeah. I think that just comes with experience and knowledge. And as you get more advanced, you actually can have clairvoyance, can actually see the spirit, you know. I mean, for example, Tibetan doctors, they can, just by checking, they check your pulses, and they also check your urine. They can even see from your urine that you're being interfered with by spirits. But even if you take the view that there are spirits, are these unhappy beings interfering with you, either living inside you or interfering from the outside, even if you take that as your view. So for example, when I heard one fellow came to see me in Sydney, and he said all of a sudden one day he started hearing these voices. Now, if you have the view of the materialist view, then you hear that and you just think the poor guy's schizophrenic and you give him a pill. I'm not being rude, I mean, it was because you don't posit a spirit. But if you have the view, and I posited the possibility it was a spirit, it sounded like it, and basically there was this particular mantra that I'd learned that is a particularly good one for this type of thing, and I gave it to him to do. And it seemed to work, it seemed to help. Sometimes the spirit's really strong. So if you take that as a view, even without being clairvoyant, you can kind of tell by the way the person's talking. Or you just listen to the person's experience. Like this one woman talked in detail about, was in Puerto Rico. She talked about this, especially in her dreams, all these people come at night, these dudes, and they come and she helps them. And she was all very excited about it. And then she started to talk how they're starting to dominate her and become very possessive. And she was freaking out, So either you think she's completely making up a story and she's insane, or you think it's actually true. Well, the Buddhist, you would say, and it sounded the way she said it, that it was true. So, I take that view. So, I remember one woman, some terrible suffering actually. One woman, just one day, sitting in a cafe, suddenly felt something strongly come inside her, she said. And then from then on, all she could hear was these constant, loud, abusive voices. Not her own voice, not her own mind. Crystal clear, constantly abusing her, day and night. She couldn't sleep sometimes for weeks. It's like someone living next to you, screaming at you all day. And she eventually lost the plot completely. It was too much for her. The pain was so incredible. She went to different lamas. I had lamas over to do practices for her. But sometimes the interference can be so powerful. So it's a bit like you got karma with somebody. If you've got karma to have a guy next door keeps beating you up, due to past negative karma with that person, they beat you up. Or some people have karma with beings who are internal, or spirits who are subtle, who harm them. It's a very common thing among Buddhists, so you take that as a view. But the more advanced you are, the more clearly you can see. And therefore, but sometimes it's very hard. Like even you can help a person every day who's got an abusive relationship. You can suggest that she leave every day, but the karma is so strong between people, she won't leave him. You can see this. Sometimes you can't help people. The karma is too strong, Same with spirits. I remember one woman who's possessed, they talk about like nagas, a certain kind of being called nagas. So all these different kinds of beings, And they're there all the time, so they're always just there, about there, living in, just there, about there. She feels them about there. And every now and again they take over. And she writhes like a snake and screams like a banshee. Of course, she'd be locked up if the regular people got hold of her. And most of the time she just lives with them, and it's peaceful. But they like that, these nagas like the Dharma, that's how they talk. So she was one time at the centre, at Milarepa Centre, when Lama Zopa was there and Kirti Samshat Rinpoche was there. They spent days and days and days with her trying to subdue these beings, and nothing worked. Nothing worked. So she just lives with them. So you either take that view as real, or you think she's, I'm insane and she's insane. You understand? Apparently it's a very common way for why people suffer, and also illnesses. Like, for example, I had really serious sciatica one time. No matter what happened, my sister's a chiropractor and she used to just be able to fix it. No matter what she did, it didn't help. Acupuncture, nothing helped. And I checked with Rinpoche, and he said it was spirits interfering with me. So these spirits live everywhere. These dudes live everywhere, out in the bush, all over the place. And what happened? Oh, sorry, no, nothing. And they were interfering with me, so I must have upset them somehow, you know. So then, no matter what I did, nothing helped. And then one time at Copan, one course, a bunch of people who knew me asked Lama Lunda what practices they should do to help me. So they did White Tara. And then one day I just woke up in the morning and I knew something had changed. And I went to my acupuncturist friend and it stopped, it fixed, you know, because the interference the spirits went away. This is the kind of way, this is how things happen, yeah. That's how they say. So I accept this as a view. You know, what can I say? They're suffering beings. They're in the realm of the spirits. Means they're kind of, there's different realms of existence, and the suffering realms are related very strongly to the three poisons. So animals tends to be as a result of predominance of incredible ignorance. You get an animal birth. Your mind's very limited. Spirits are mainly to do with incredible attachment and grasping. They don't have physical bodies, but they've got subtle, you know, their elements of manifesting as like subtle air. Their minds are conjoined with air. So they can kind of enter people and enter things, you know. Flit from pillar to post. This is one story. I mean, Geshe Lama Kontrog, one of our lamas who died 20 years ago, he's reborn now. There's that movie you might have seen called The Unmistaken Child. He's that one, reincarnation of him. So he was a great meditator, lived on the mountains, no food, no sleep, no, you know, lived naked in the mountains, extraordinarily holy being, clairvoyant, bodhicitta, all these realizations. And so commonly in some of these places, lots of spirits, right? So there's one story about one of these nuns at the nunnery. The nuns came traipsing up to his cave crying, Annie Tenzin's gone crazy, Annie Tenzin's gone crazy. So he said, I'll go. So he went down, and as he walked in, the nun is in the bed, and she's got this very deep voice. So he's clairvoyant. I mean, you can take this story or leave it, I'm just telling you, okay? He's clairvoyant, he can see completely. It's a villager, one of the villagers who died recently. And apparently what happens is when you're a spirit who possesses somebody, you've got intense attachment to something that they've got, usually of yours. So Geshe-la would say he said to the nun, talking to the spirit, you know, otherwise, why are you here? What is it you want? What do you want? He said, the spirit in the nun, I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. I want my pink thermos with the white flowers. And the nuns remembered, because there was a thermos, that this villager had given the nun a thermos of tea, and she hadn't given the thermos back. So he's attached to his thermos. I mean, look at us with our possessions. Attachment to a thermos. Look at us and our possessions. Holding on to them, clinging to them. And we're all hoarders. Just some of us, we're all hoarders. Sometimes we're clean hoarders, that's all. Hoarders aren't just dirty people, you know. Nice people can hoard as well. You understand? So he died with his attachment to his thermos. So he's born as a spirit, running after his thermos, driven from pillar to post by this intense attachment. So there's certain prayers that Geshe-la was able to do because he could see whatever, and at least he had a connection with Geshe-la, so Geshe-la could help him. And then the spirit sort of was crying and saying, I can't find my way, I can't find my way. It was very poignant. So Geshe-la was able to somehow enable the spirit's mind to leave the body and to get a human life. Was able to help. These holy beings can do that, you know. So in that case, it was possible to help. So I remember then this other woman at Copan one time went kind of nuts, and they checked with Geshe-la. He said, oh yeah, she's possessed. You'll find something in her luggage. So they found this, she was Jewish, and they found this Jewish thing that her father had bought in an antique store. So I always worry about buying secondhand things now, because you know the previous owner comes along with it. if you're not lucky. So she was completely out of her brain, you know, you go berserk. And sometimes with the spirit, with a thermos, because it was a villager and Geshe-la knew him and the villager knew Geshe-la, recognized Geshe-la, you know. But with this case, this woman didn't know Geshe-la, Geshe-la didn't know this woman. And this is one of the common methods. It sounds kind of weird, but because the object, in this case that she had, attracted the spirit to come, he wants his object back, basically, you know. So you have to kind of you have to use wrathful means of making the spirit go away. So first of all, you throw the object away. So it breaks the connection, you know, so they throw the object away. And then he has to shout at the spirit. So he's getting a shoe, whacking this poor girl, you know, because he's whacking the spirit, right? You go away from here, you know. And so the spirit sometimes leaves. This is what they do. It sounds hilarious. There's one woman I know in Kathmandu, you can tell she's possessed by a spirit, hearing voices, talking all the time, and doesn't know, but she doesn't realize. And she went to one centre in England, and the Geshe there could see, obviously, so he was beating her, and she came back to Kathmandu, and the Geshe beat me. She didn't know why, you see. Are you understand what I'm saying, people? It sounds very arcane and weird, I understand that. I'm just telling you stories, okay? So we don't want to be born as one of them, all right? Very distressing type of rebirth. You're pushed from pillar to post by your crazy attachment. So just try and give up attachment. This is one big practice. Give up attachment to your things before you die, please. That's one of the practices they say that's really important, and we do that. It's really important you write a will. And then in your mind, you really do want to give it all away. Because one of the worst sufferings at death is holding on to your things and possessiveness and being possessive, you know. That's about the worst thing for you. And this is why they say, even if you haven't given everything away, make sure that you, after your loved ones die, make sure you give everything away. That's really good for the karma of the person. Because attachment is so intense. And because we have so many things, you know. Of course we're attached to things. One thing breaks and you freak out and you want to, I've got a house now. I can't get over myself. I've never been a householder in my life. I think for one period, when I was brought up in a Catholic family, I lived in it was like a commune, a Catholic commune, 9 people in the family, sharing everything, you know, when I was a kid. Then I became a hippie, I lived in hippie communes. Then I became radical lefty, lived in radical lefty communes. Then I became a feminist, radical feminist communes. Then I became a Buddhist. I've been living in communes around, like monasteries and centres all over the world. You know, I've never had a place of my own. For like 6 months, when I left home first, when I was 23, I rented what they called a bed sit, which is a bed sitter, which is now they call them studios, in London for £5 a week, and I went and bought dishes. I remember that. It was like 6 months, the first and only time in my life. So it's so peculiar to have a place, to be a householder, which meant I had to buy things. Do you understand? So I had someone said I should get a butter dish. So I went on to Wayfair and bought a butter dish, a cute little red butter dish with a little red bird on it. I'm buying a butter dish, okay, and I broke it. And I thought, oh, my poor little red butter dish, and I went and bought another one. That's called attachment. Okay, I've got to have a butter dish. I might as well put it on the floor, make it look pretty. If I have friends, I can offer my nice butter dish. So have your possessions, but think of them as things to make other people happy. If you don't, you're in big trouble, I promise you. I mean, I was attached to my butter dish. I'd never thought of a butter dish in my life. I didn't need to. Suddenly I'm thinking of a butter dish. Are you understanding me? Not to mention tables and chairs and fridges and, you understand? So we've got to watch our minds and to get perspective, get priority. In your mind, have it, use it, but in your mind, give it away. Give it away. Think of it as already gone, you know. It's a really important practice. This is a powerful way to think of death. Get rid of it. Then, of course, you won't have someone, and when you realise your body is the same thing, you know, the body, they say the body, I mean, Roger says the body is the most powerful one we're attached to, because that's what we think of me. We think this is me, you know. So the mighty grasping to it at the time of death is intense. So get used to that. So this is where having detachment for something doesn't mean you have to have a dirty house or no butter dish. It's not a question of that. If you're on the body sattva path, you can have beautiful things, but think of them as offerings. And then you can get the best of both worlds. It's really sensible. And especially if you've got tantra and you're learning to see yourself as Vajrayogini, see yourself as a deity, you need to have what they call divine pride. So then you're not going to live in a shitty, dirty house. You can live in a lovely house, have beautiful things, thinking of it as the environment of the deity. This is profound psychology. And then you have bodhicitta and give it all away. Do you understand me? It's really important to think this way. So being renounced doesn't mean you have to be dirty and smelly. That's ridiculous. So have beautiful things. Have a healthy body. Try to make yourself look beautiful. Based on bodhicitta and emptiness and great bliss, then it's transformed. Anyway, something else, any more questions, people? When we look at the book, and let's go through the book and say some things, okay? We have to find it first. Maybe it's not there. No, it's not there. I need to be online. It's no good at all. I can't do it. How do I get online here? What's the password?
There's a question. Can I just take this and I'll type it in for you? There's a question.
Okay, good. Yes, talk to me. Yes, darling. Hi, take the mic. Yes, sweetheart.
It's on, okay.
Good.
So observing about attachment to physical things, but as well as even in meditation, a practice that I started doing with specifically my mom, but other people in the past, has been Tong Len. And my understanding, can you explain it to me? Because I feel like I was having a discussion with a friend earlier, and it seems almost impossible for me to separate the attachment I have when I'm visualizing, the breath coming in, and visualizing the sickness in my mom, like it's her brain, Alzheimer's. So I was taught that you visualize the illness or the suffering, whatever way your mind presents it, and then.
But what do you do? How do you do the meditation? How do you think of that suffering? What do you do with it?
So what I do with it, what I was taught, which was to breathe in that suffering with my breath, and then visualize with my exhale light and healing.
No, that's not Tong Len. Who told you that?
Just a while back.
That's not Tong Len at all.
Okay, so would you explain it to me?
I will do. Yes, I will. Exactly. It's actually a very advanced practice in the Bodhisattva path, where you're learning, because you're energized by this powerful wish to become a Buddha as quickly as possible to help others. It's really a powerful practice for compassion. So what it is, you visualize, let's say your mum with Alzheimer's, and when you breathe in, you imagine breathing in, like yucky smoke, her suffering. And you're visualizing taking the suffering away from her. You want her to be free of suffering. Not only do you want her to be free of suffering, and that's called compassion, may you be free of suffering, but you're even imagining taking it and breathing it into yourself and you having it rather than her. So it's not a healing technique. It's a technique for you to develop this powerful courage that if you could, you'd rather have the suffering than your mum. It's a really powerful, brave attitude that, you know what, I can handle it. Give it to me, mum. I'd rather you be free of suffering and I'll take it upon. And then when you breathe it in, there's all sorts of ways of imagining, but you're imagining breathing it in and that it smashes your ego and smashes your self-cherishing and smashes your attachment. And then when you breathe out radiant light, and you imagine giving your mother, which is called love, may you be happy, giving her your health, your wealth, all your merit, your virtue, giving it all to her. It's a technique for you. It's intense, actually.
Okay.
It's a brave, in other words, compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering, that's terrible. May you not suffer. That's compassion. The next level of compassion, which is the one of the Bodhisattva, is even more powerful. They call it literally great compassion. You know what? No, it's like, what can I do to help? That's a powerful one. Even more than that, it's like, the cherry on the top. You know what, mummy? You know what, honey? I'll take it. Give it to me. It's really intense. It's not a healing technique. It's not, and you're not trying to get a headache. You're not trying to get Alzheimer's. You're having this courage that if you could, you would rather have it. So it's an intense technique for you to smash your own ego, to smash delusions, to smash attachment and self-cherishing. Okay. That's exactly the purpose of it.
Okay, thank you.
Do you understand?
I do.
Such that one day, you will be able to actually take upon yourself somebody else's suffering instead of them having it. So there's always this story I like to tell. I've told it many times, including here. One of our friends, an American fellow called Harry, who's been a meditator for like 30 years, up in the mountains, you know. And one time he was at Kopan Monastery, this is years ago, and Lama Zopa was there. And he was getting ready, packing his backpack to go up the mountains and go back to his cave. He's got a cave up in the mountains. And Lama Zopa said he had a dream that Harry would die to tell Harry not to go. But because it must have been before cell phones, because, you know, it was too late, Harry had left. And also, incidentally, I'd say Lama Zopa didn't have a dream because he doesn't sleep. He was clairvoyant, he could see. So he said to tell Harry not to go. So then it was too late, they couldn't get to Harry, he'd gone. So he asked Geshe Lama Kongtrul, this amazing yogi I just mentioned before about the spirits, he asked him to please pray for Harry. So what happened was, Harry told me this story, and many people have heard the story from him. So he's walking up the mountains with his backpack on, and these really treacherous roads up there, you know, very tiny paths, you know, and there's one, the normal one there was a rock slide, what do you call it? Like that, yeah. So he had to go up this really treacherous path with his backpack on. Somebody was with him, she must have told the story. And suddenly, coming down this really narrow path, very treacherous, were three or four porters, Sherpas, with their 60-kilo packs on their back, or their 20-kilo packs, and they're bent over double, and all you can do is see your feet, and it's really treacherous. I know from when we went on trekking, it's intense, the packs they carry, and this very narrow road, slight shift could have fallen over, you know. In fact, people go over the cliffs. So he's been meditating for years, clearly doing this technique. So he said his first thought was, okay, 4 of them, 1 of me, I'll step to the side. So all these techniques you use to smash ego, because instinct of I is to support me, is to look after me, put me there first. And our natural response would be to stand up against the cliff, let them pass and hope they don't fall down. But he put himself towards the edge of the cliff. He said, I'll step to the side. He stepped to the edge of the cliff, and it was also intense and quick. And then he realized it's so intense, he said to himself, if they knock me, I won't hold on. So they knocked him. He didn't mean to. And he said his feet are on the ground, and he's feeling his pack pull him. And he doesn't hold on. And then he feels the hands of Geshe Lama Kongtrul really powerfully pushing him, and he reversed direction and fell into the Sherpas. So I like that story. So that shows the power of bodhicitta. He'd perfected that practice. He put his money where his mouth was. He actually did, you know, take it upon himself spontaneously. There's no drama about it. He'd trained his mind in meditation for years. But that also shows the power of the holy beings, the power of Buddhas, the power of sentient, the power of these bodhisattvas, who are able to literally manifest where they're needed. You know? Do you understand? I like that story. Yeah, let me find the book. I can't find the book. Hang on a second. We've got it. Yeah, good. Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great. Excellent. Okay. This is the I can place this for that here. There's a statue of the Buddha in death. In the way he died. He died on his right side. There's a way that he died. And there's a statue at the London Centre, Jamyang. The Buddha in the dying posture. Okay, so just... Okay. All right, so just we'll go through the structure, really, the book, the way it's structured is kind of chronological. So the part 1, how to think about death and reincarnation, like chapter 1, what happens after death? Everyone dies, so there's no need to be afraid. Death is easy when we've given up attachment. Get ready for death by living life with a good heart. You know, just different chapters. Pray to be reborn in Amitabha's pure land. Let me go into that one. Part 2, how we go from one life to the next. So there's what happens at death, just an explanation. You know, the 12 links that depend on arising at the time of death, then the 8 stages of death and what happens, intermediate state, rebirth, and so on and so forth. And I'll go through those now. Today's not Sunday, is it? It is, not Sunday. Okay, we've got tomorrow as well. Death is what the yogis have been waiting for. So that'll be really, especially those of you who've taken highest yoga in Tantra empowerments recently. It's very important. There's all background stuff. Now, Part 3 is practices to do in the months and weeks before death. And then part 4, practices to do in the hours and days after the breath has stopped. Part 5, practices to do after the mind has left. So it's kind of chronological, you know. So this is where all the practices are labelled and are structured. So helping others, remember she talks about helping others is a big responsibility. We've talked about that. Create a conducive environment for a peaceful death. Make the place beautiful and quiet. You know, no troublemakers there. Keep the pets out. That's shocking to us because we have so much attachment for our pets. And I think that's part of our problem in our lives, in our world. We conflate love and attachment. We're mainly attached to our pets, you know. That's why we kill them when they, and I don't mean mean, I'm not being mean, never mind, I won't be mean, I won't say anything. We have to distinguish between attachment. This is very hard because we don't think like this, you know. Attachment is the worst suffering in a dying person. So to give them all the things to be attached to, it seems like we're being kind. Do you understand? To give the pets and bring the loved ones and put the movies on and put the television on and keep them busy. It's the worst possible thing you can do. It's just feeding it's like giving a junkie heroin every day. The mind has to be peaceful. Oh, yeah. Can we stop the echo? There he has, squeeze his tongue. So it's got to be conducive. The environment has to be peaceful with beautiful images. So if they're a Christian, put images of Jesus and the saints, whatever you like, you know. If they're a Hindu, put Hindu images. If it's Christian, you know, Buddhist, whatever's pleasing to their senses. The sounds should, you know, help their mind. The things they see, things they touch. Even there's a whole section, practice to do in the months and weeks before. You know, the practice is what to see and touch. Literally, you try to enhance all the senses. What to think about, what to hear, what to meditate on, what to do to purify negative karma. All these different practices. So many of the practices are mentioned in this first lot, you know. They're all in the back. You can choose. It's not being mean to the person to kind of not put their pets in it's to help their mind go away from objects of attachment, which is our tendency, our addiction, but to enable the person to go inside, enable the person to become, you know, not to be, if you don't give them something to be attached to, then you won't have to think about it. And then be this kind of kind presence for the person. That's really the main gift. You don't have to be technically clever. Just to be aware of the person's needs, make the room beautiful, make the bed, make the place peaceful, when they open their eyes, just, you know, in and out of like consciousness, in and out of sleep, you know, have beautiful views out the window, for example. Or think lovely things to look at so they come in and out so their mind is peaceful. But if it's like clutter and dark and ugly and smelly, it's the worst thing to offer people. We tend to think because they're in a coma even, or because they're half dead and half alive, it doesn't matter. It matters, you know. You have to make it light and sweet and peaceful. And then what to see and touch, and that's, you know, like I said, the pictures. You can have blessing string on them, you can have a prayer wheel, you can have different things like that, you know. Texts on their heart chakra, on their crown, mantras being played, prayers being played, and of course it's suiting the person what they want. So then you see the next bit, part 4. There's lots of those practices, different practices to do this. You can read different things, or it suits the person. One of the things is what to talk about, what to think about. So, you know, like if your mummy loves God, it depends how close her relationship is. She might just vaguely think about God, but talk to her about God. Like I said, bring it up as a topic. I've been thinking about God lately. God loves us, and God's thinking about you, and God loves you, mummy. God, and heaven is beautiful. Then her attachment can go away from holding on to looking forward. It's very wise, you know. Or to think about the one I said before, tell them about their good qualities. We don't ever think about good qualities, and when you die, you're even more neurotic and anxious and guilty, unless you've practiced all your life. So say to your mother what a good mother she's been, what a kind person, what a good life you've led. It's like nectar to hear that. Soften their hearts, you know, relax their mind, so they can rejoice. because that makes the mind peaceful. I always think like in those old people homes, you know, when they're drugged out of their brains or they're watching television all day, and many have no family, no one to take care of them. It's so sad, you know. I always think that even just a cleaning lady can be kind, give a kind smile to a person. It's going to be like heaven. Kindness is the most precious thing at the time. Kindness, making people feel supported, you know. Not just drug them out of their brain and say, oh, they look peaceful. No. So the next part 4, the practice is to do in the hours and days after the breath has stopped. Well, the last bit before is what to do in the hours before death. So Rinpoche says there, we'll talk about that, 103, the hours before death. And the fact is you learn, Rinpoche says it's important to learn this, understand this process so you become familiar with it. It takes time to get this sort of sense of how close the person is. And I know many doctors and nurses and people who work in this industry, they know they're going to die today. They get a sense of the indications, isn't it? So, you know, what to do in the hours before death. You know, so be quiet. Now that death is close, it's extremely important, essential that your loved one is not disturbed. This is the main point. Don't create any situation that upsets them. People shouldn't cry within hearing distance of your loved one, helping them avoid strong attachment and the other delusions during the time that gives them a chance to have virtuous thoughts. So like I said, all my sisters were, anyway, never mind, doesn't matter. My sister was unconscious anyway. So only the sound of prayers and mantras should be heard, or the equivalent, you know. So keep the gossip out, but you think because they're in a coma, it doesn't matter, you'll gossip about the weather or the will or something. No, people can be conscious. So distressing. And ideally recognize the stages of death, but that takes time. And sometimes, you know, they would give them a blessed pill. There's different things they have, you know. It's up to you to know about those things. Think about so it depends if it's your loved one who's a Buddhist, and you've got to know where they're at. So you talk about their practice, you talk about their Lama, you talk about the Buddha, things that will make their mind, or heaven or God, whatever it is, to see holy things. You can touch them with a stupa, or you can just sit there and say their prayers. I mean, if a person's got a series of practices, you just sit there quietly and recite the prayers, you know, for them, so they can just hear it. Or have teachings on, if they like the Dalai Lama, have teachings of the Dalai Lama quietly in the background. This is something you can do for animals, I tell you. The best way to help animals is have mantras on 24 hours a day, quietly, you know. Because even when they're unconscious, it's blessing their mind, and this attracts the presence of the Buddhas to be there. Do different practices, recite the medicine Buddha mantra, whatever. And at this point too, if you're a Buddhist, this is where you'd have monasteries, like you'd contact Kopan Monastery or somewhere, and you get prayers and practices done for them. You know, that can be very powerful. So now the practice is doing the hours and days after the breath has stopped. So there's different scenarios here. So the first one is chapter 19, what to do as soon as the breath stops. So there's different things, you know. Don't touch the body. Best not to touch the body. You put blessed substances on their crown, perhaps. You can do that, or put a text there, or on their heart chakra. This is very various. What they do is, one of the first things you should do is you shout in their ear the name of, like if they're a Christian, God loves you, mummy. It sounds very funny, but because, you know, you kind of lost the plot already. So but if you shout it loud, it really sounds very funny, but it's kind of logical. The last thing they hear, you know, before they die, or whatever you want to say, doesn't matter. People say, I love you, that's fine too. Touch with blessed substances, or, you know, organize pujas and prayers, but be quiet. So if your loved one dies at home, that's the ideal scenario. You have control over the whole thing. And if you want to do the whole thing of 3 days, so what you do is you treat the room like a shrine room. You'd have people, like with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, okay, he was different because he's a meditator, but for the 49 days, which is mostly for our benefit, people are doing practices 24 hours a day for the 49 days. Every night at 10 p.m. till midnight, the nuns would come up, 100 nuns come up from the nunnery and do the Vajrayogini self-initiation. Every morning, the monks would do the Yamataka self-initiation. Throughout the day, constant practices. The Western people in the Chenrezig Gompa practices from 6 in the morning until evening, you know, going to Lama Zopa's room, constant prayers and practices that are really for our benefit, especially when it's a holy being, you know. They don't need prayers. But it's your loved one, yes, for sure. So, you know, no pets. You keep the pets out of the way because it's attachment, that's why. It'll distress them. Especially cats, they say. I mean, it's very upsetting for people who love their cats. Because cats have some relationship with spirits. They're kind of heavy-duty dudes, cats, you know. I don't know. It's up to you to think about those things. I don't have pets. You can offer lights. Touch their body with holy objects, do practices, sponsor monasteries, many things. There's certain prayers. There's a typical prayers we do in the Gelugpa monasteries called the 8 prayers to benefit the dead. So, you know, I had a friend who was like 96 who died uptown in New York. I'd take the 1 train up there to 96th Street. He was in this place 24 hours a day with a person taking care, and then he died. So we went up there and did all these prayers, you know, the King of Prayers, recited them out loud, you know. All sorts of practices. Practices that are in the back you can suggest, you can check, that you can do. And always what you do is before you move the body, so in this case it might leave it for 3 days, you check if the mind has left. And there are different things that can show whether the mind has left. So one of them, there's a chapter that shows them. One of them is, one of the good signs apparently is after the 3 days, up to 3 days, if you put your hand above the heart chakra there, I'll go through the death process, which describes what happens, then that's the last place the mind would be. This very subtle consciousness goes to the heart chakra. Everywhere else would be cold. If it's still warm there, then the mind is still there. So I found with my sister only 5 hours after she stopped breathing. So what I did realize, I didn't think of it beforehand, was that her core, of course, was still warm. That's the last place the heat would leave. But I didn't stay with her long enough to know whether the heat was at her heart or not. I couldn't tell, you know. But that is one way, especially if it starts several days. The other one is something, and this is what happens in Lama Zopa apparently. You know, people were doing the prayers and he'd been in his meditation for 2.5 days or something, not very long. And it was interesting, at a particular time, there was a Guya Samaja self-initiation going on, and the monk who was in the room with Rinpoche's holy body while Rinpoche was sitting in meditation was very familiar with the prayers being said, and at some point, the goddesses requested the yogi to stop his meditation. So the monk went into the room, he thought that was an auspicious time, and he saw, and at that moment, the red bodhicitta came out of Rinpoche's nose, which means his meditation had finished. Because at the 8th stage of death, I'm going to go through it, at the 8th stage of death, what they call the red and white drops, this tiny, subtle kind of red and white energy that comes from the white one from the father, which is in what we call the sperm, and the red one from the mother, which is what is in the egg from the mother. But these are subtler things called red and white drops, they call them. They are what join, and your consciousness joins that at the time of conception. So that second that your consciousness joins that egg and sperm, but joins that subtle red and white drops, you begin at the heart chakra. You begin there, and then you grow over the period in the womb. You know, you start to grow and turn into a fetus, into a human body. So the death process, all the different energies are going, stopping, getting more subtle, and everything ends up just at the heart chakra. And that as long as the red and white drop are there, which you got from your mummy and daddy, your very subtle consciousness is conjoined with that. Your clear light mind is conjoined with that. What death is when that red and white drop split apart. And then the red one will continue, and for the male will come out of the nose. From the female will come out of the vagina. And the white one will go out, and the opposite for the white one. I don't know if they saw the white one. So that's when death is. That's when your consciousness leaves that breaks open, that red and white drop, and that's death. That's death. And that can be up to 3 days for an ordinary person after you've stopped breathing. But someone like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who was a meditator, and he only meditated for 1.5 days or something. Many people stay like that for months, days, weeks. Lama Yeshe, for example, stayed meditating for 5 days. They can see when the red one comes out. That's a sign that the mind has left. I didn't see that on Jan, my sister. Okay? So then when you know the consciousness has not left, when you know the mind has left, then you have nothing more to do. But if it hasn't left, one thing you can do to encourage it to leave is you tap very strongly on the crown chakra. Because, okay, we've got gross consciousness and we have gross body. The gross body is this bag of bones and is inextricably linked with the gross consciousness, which is your sensory consciousness. So the first 4 stages of death, the first one, I'll do the 8 stages. So roughly speaking, the first various things cease at each of these stages. So at the first stage, the earth element ceases, which means the body gets very heavy, kind of feels like it's sinking. Also, the form aggregate ceases, and something similar about the body. Then there's a certain kind of, they call the 5 wisdoms, and the first of these is called the mirror-like wisdom. This ability to see a lot of things all at once, hold a lot of information, it's like visual. This ceases. And the 4th one is the eye consciousness ceases. And the 5th thing is you have a vision. They talk about a vision, a subtle vision of like a mirage, which is the interplay of the earth element ceasing and then causing the water element to prevail. So a mirage is like an interplay of earth and water, isn't it? There's a subtle vision. It happens every time you go to sleep, but we don't notice. So at the second stage, and this can happen quite slowly or quite quickly, depending on the way the person dies. At the second stage, the form feeling of the 5 aggregates feeling, and then the wisdom of discriminating between pleasure, pain, and indifference kind of ceases to function properly. I don't quite understand that one. Then the ear consciousness ceases. We have this experience every time we go to sleep. And I always use the example of I'm sitting there listening to you talking, we're chatting away, and I'm really tired. Well, first of all, my eyes are open, aren't they? But I really can't, everything becomes very vague. I can't see you very well, isn't it? You're really tired. And look what happens, then you keep getting tireder, and then suddenly you'll keep talking to me, but I don't hear the last 10 seconds. That happens very common. You're still sitting upright, but your ear, the senses are going in, and these 5, and the elements are ceasing, gradually ceasing. So that's the second, and then the inner sign is like, because the water element is ceasing at the second stage, and so there's like this vision of kind of the interplay of, the vision of sort of like, it's like smoky, interplay of water, and then the next one, which is fire. Then the third one is the form, feeling, recognition, ability, this mental factor that enables you to distinguish between friends, enemies, and strangers in particular, that ceases. And then the wisdom of distinguishing, distinguishing between, similar to the, what's that one? Similar to the aggregate, yeah. That ceases. You've got your auntie on one side who you hate and your beloved boyfriend on that side. You can't tell the difference. You're losing the plot step by step. Now the fire element, the heat begins to leave your body. And this is interesting. The way the heat leaves the body is very much an indicator of the type of rebirth you'll get. So if the heat leaves your head first and your feet stay toasty, that's a bad sign. You're going to go to the lower realms. So I was joking, saying you should put a thermos, put a water thing on their head, but it's a bit late. Because about this point, the second or third stages, is when the other system, the 12 links kicks in, and this is when that grasping kicks in very strongly, and then about this point triggers the karmic seed that will determine your next life. This is when this happens, about this point. So already, if the heat is leaving your feet first, and your head stays all toasty, that's a good sign. And the death will be very peaceful. So that point too, there's earth, air, fire, water. Water ceases. Earth, water, fire, that ceases. And the vision is like sparks. And then by this point, your hearing is gone, your eyes are beginning to go. You can't put two and two together. You're pretty much losing the plot by this point. The senses are going, these 5 inner wisdoms are gradually ceasing. And by this fourth point, your breath stops, your tactile consciousness and nose consciousness. No, that stops at the 4th one. The third one. The 4th one, your tongue consciousness and your tactile consciousness cease. And as Geshe Rabton says, I always quote this, that tongue that spent its life gossiping is now useless. Apparently gets short at the root, blue at the root and very short. And then the breath stops, goes out and doesn't go in. And by this point, you've lost the plot in terms of volition, you know, you can't, whatever thoughts, you no longer even recognize who you are. You finally don't know who you are. You have a thought and there's no meaning. You can't put two and two together. And then by this point, you stop breathing. And now that's when we think a person is dead, but their gross consciousness only has ceased. Then the fifth stage is now you kick into the subtle consciousness. And that consists of the 72,000 subtle channels throughout the body, like a subtle nervous system, through which course these different wind energies, these prana, all these different wind energies, which is your subtle physicality, and inextricably linked to that wind energy, like I said before, the different winds are connected to the different states of mind, which is clearly not neuroscience. It's a very different model, you know. And then you've got the third component of this subtle body, and that's that red and white kundalini, they call it, the red and white drops. So the subtle drops are at the heart, but they also are in the channels. And so the white kundalini predominates at the crown chakra. There's got these various chakras, and all it is just a coming together of these various channels. You've got the 72,000 channels in general. You've got a specific central channel, which starts up there towards the back of you, as if your spine went all the way up. It starts up there, closer to the back of the body, and goes all the way down, the central channel, all the way down, ends at the penis for the boys and the cervix for the girls. You've got two side channels that start here, then go up, and then all the way either side of the central channel. And then all the others. So there's a constriction of the various channels called chakras. Wheels, they call. But it's not cool. Chakras aren't cool, they're a hassle. Because all the channels are constricted. Here, 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 below the navel, and 3 at the end. On the outside for the boys and on the inside of the central channel for the girls. So the whole idea is, for the yogis, death is what the yogis have been waiting for. It's one of the chapters. These highest yoga tantra practices that I know some of you have done recently, Vajrayogini and Yamantaka, these sadhanas are constructed, are related to this death process. And this is where the practices, and the great yogis throughout their lives, are practicing, using their deity yoga practices, combining with this dissolution process that occurs at death, but training themselves to go through it, meaning the greatest yogis can then go through this dissolution practice, deconstruction process, and be conscious at each of the stages, meditating on emptiness. For most of us, we lose the plot by the time we stop breathing. The rest just happens. And before you know it, you wake up in another body, you know. But these guys, they're in charge of it. You're completely conscious of different, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And this practice is in the sadhana. So the deity yoga practices are geared to this type of practice. And this is the best way, as Lama Zopa says, to train yourself to be ready for death, you know. Because then you can transform death into the Dharmakaya, rebirth into the Sambhogakaya, and the Bardo, and then the rebirth into the Nirmanakaya, the 3 bodies of a Buddha. So this happens naturally, and we've died countless lives, but we don't remember it because we haven't practiced, you know. We're not conscious. So then the 5th stage is when the white kundalini melts down the center. Okay, sorry, in relation to the chakras, the meditators are able, you see, the whole goal of what happens naturally at death is all the mental and physical energies deconstruct, cease, get more subtle, more subtle. So naturally, as you know, even when you go to sleep, the airs and the mind related to those airs have all moved out of all the side channels and have all gathered into your central channel. Your chakras open up and all the airs with the mind go into the central channel. That's why at a grosser level, you're unconscious. Well, the meditators are in charge of that, and they are able to open up the chakras for the winds and the mind connected to the winds to go into the central channel, which means now the mind is more subtle. So here in the death process, the white kundalini melts down the central channel and comes to the heart chakra. And at that point, various states of mental consciousness cease to function. There's a long list of these. And there's this white vision. Then the red kundalini, which predominates at the navel chakra, comes up the central channel and comes to the heart chakra, and then there's a red vision. And then the next level, these two kind of enclose the subtle drop, and then there's dark vision, and the mind's getting ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle. And then finally, when that opens, that's the clear light consciousness, the subtlest level of your mind. And because the subtlest level of mind, the clear light mind at death, is the most powerful, the most powerful. And that's what the yogis have been waiting for. They've been training all their lives to get to their mind to the subtlest level, because then at that point you can become enlightened. You can do all the necessary work to remove all the obstacles from the mind and achieve all the realizations. That's why some yogis can stay in their mind, in their body for days and days and days, meditating, literally becoming an omniscient mind. That level of mind is the most potent, most subtle. And all the practices are geared to this. The highest yoga tantra practices. Are we communicating? Okay, good. So as Lama Yeshe says, tantra is highly technical. It's exactly what it is. It's not mystical and hippie-trippy. So the very best we can do is give up attachment, recognize impermanence, become familiar with this technique, practice the meditation of it, one of the many meditations in the book. You can guide your loved one through that practice if they are familiar with this technique, So you've got familiarity with it. So you might, some semblance of something might occur at death, even if you're not a great yogi, Some clarity. So then for an ordinary person, already you lost the plot by the time you stop breathing. So the mind goes through these stages, and then you'd stay at the drop, the red and the white drop, this indestructible drop at the heart, made up of the red and the white from the mummy and daddy. They haven't opened up yet, they just stay there. So you're unconscious for that period. And you can stay in that state for up to 3 days. That's why it's important to leave for 3 days. And then the sign will come, like with Lama Zopa, who's in charge of the process. He only needs to meditate for a couple of days, So for someone like him, he has complete control. So he either takes a rebirth already, has found his womb where he wants to be reborn, or he's in a Pure Land. There's only 2 options, really. So what's a Pure Land? Okay, I remember I told you I was very cynical about stupid old Pure Land. I want to be born a human, I thought, like that. So then I told you, I got this letter from Holly, Venerable Holly, after Rinpoche's stroke. He'd given this teaching on Amitabha. So let me read it to you. It's very inspiring. Okay. Page 31. Okay. So pray to be reborn in Amitabha's Pure Land. So in order to achieve enlightenment quickly for sentient beings, not for yourself, for sentient beings, we need to make sure we go to a Pure Land after we die. Okay, so I've got to explain that to you, what a Pure Land is. Okay. Okay. So we're humans, right? And so we have a body, we have a mind, and we all know we have an environment in which we live. We don't all float in the sky, right? So this is the way karma ripens. So and then you've got a hell being. You could say who, due to heavy negative karma, the tendency to kill and harm, program their mind, died with terrible fear, and their consciousness gets reborn in this state of being, an actual state of mind, where their elements, due to anger and violence and negativity, literally their 4 elements are manifesting as predominantly fire. So their mind, you could argue, are conjoined with fire and having karmic appearances of intense, unbelievable suffering. As Lama Yeshe said, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting, saying, ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe. It is the manifestation. And all these realms that we live in are manifestations of our own past actions. So human realm is a manifestation of karma that we created. But of course, because we have ignorance, we all think it's all existing out there and we got plonked in it, you know. Somebody made it and put us here. That's completely schizophrenic for the Buddha. So the hell brings the most intensity of suffering because your mind is conjoined with, you could argue, we've got the 4 elements. And your mind is conjoined with those 4 elements. And then you have the karmic appearances of that kind of rebirth. Well, the suffering of a hell being is absolutely beyond bearing. So the mind, you could argue, is conjoined with the fire element. You could say like that. Then you've got the spirits, which is intense attachment energy, grasping energy. So you could argue that their 4 elements are predominantly air energy and they fit from pillar to post. Then animals, and we have a similar body in this realm anyway, with human, not like eons ago. We're virtually looking like a bunch of apes, isn't it? Almost the same DNA, that kind of thing they talk about. So we've got this grosser bodies, and this is the animal realm is predominantly of ignorance, and the predominant function of that ignorance is very fundamentalist, narrow-minded, not much space. Not much space for clarity and wisdom and thinking things through and changing your mind, set in stone. So intense suffering. And again, this is where it's so shocking to us. I always remember one time Lama Zopa Rinpoche said that even the mind of our little cute dog, who we think is adorable, the happiest person on the planet, he said, if we could just for a moment experience directly their mind of ignorance, the suffering would be absolutely unbearable. We wish to never waste another millisecond of this precious human life. Now that is beyond shocking to us. We do not think our pets are suffering. The only way we think of suffering of animals is if they're harmed. Well, let's face it, the only time we think humans are suffering is when they're harmed. We know there's mental suffering, but what do we see in other people? We can't see much, you know. So the mind of it is just for a moment, if you had the direct experience of your dog's mind. It's very powerful. So anyway, animals predominantly of ignorance. So ignorance, attachment, and aversion, these realms of existence. These are states of mind, and nobody creates these. This is the point the Buddha is saying. We create these states of mind, and we then program our mind and therefore our wind energies to have that kind of body, which in turn then manifests as an external environment. We create the universe. It's not joking. Over eons and eons and eons. It's a very fascinating view, I've got to admit. So it's not punishment and reward, no such thing. There's no punisher, there's no rewarder. No such concept. It's superstition for the Buddha. So anyway, what am I saying? Okay, so we can see in all these lives, we have a mind conjoined with the 4 elements, which is the body, depending on the karma we created, and then we have certain interactions with certain beings, and we have an environment in which we live. Everyone's like that. And this is the universe. The universe is made of the 4 elements and minds, and all minds are conjoined with their own set of the 4 elements. And the way the 4 elements out there manifest, which is environmental karma, is due to the individual and collective karma of the sentient beings. So if you live a virtuous life, goodness and kindness and clarity and love and compassion, even just being a nice person, not having any spiritual path even, just being good, an ethical person, and help others and benefit others, you would be reborn spontaneously as like a god. Christians call it heaven, believe the creator is there, but this is just a state of being where the body is like subtle light and the mind is incredibly blissful, incredibly joyful. But that's not the end result, Buddha says. It's still in samsara, but it's joyful. It's the fruit of virtue. But it ends eventually because you've got massive attachment. And it ends because you haven't realized emptiness. So all these different realms we create. So the human realm isn't the best in terms of quality of joy, but it's the most advantageous because we have access to intelligence. And that's what we need. So we have an environment, we see that. So now, what's a pure land? Well, when you've become a Buddha, When you've fully developed your mind, when you've rid the mind of all the delusions and perfected the goodness, Buddha, that's what it implies, you have achieved, okay, that's an intense state of being. You have 3 essential qualities. Just like the Christians call about God. You're omniscient. You have infinite wisdom to see that which exists. This is the potential of all minds. Minds, by definition, their job is to cognize. Cognize what? That which exists. So when you removed all delusions from your mind is in sync with existence, in sync with that which exists. There's no disconnect. So then, because your mind is not physical, then your mind pervades wherever there is existence. I know as a little kid, as a Catholic, I loved the idea that God was everywhere. Your Buddha mind is wherever there is existence. It can't not be. And it's perfect wisdom, which means it sees the minds of all beings, all the past, all the future, and the karma, and therefore has the wisdom to know how to help sentient beings. Then you've got compassion, which is this incredible sense of connectedness with every being as if they were you, and only the wish to help. And then you have the third quality, which is called power, the effortless ability to do whatever's necessary to be of benefit to sentient beings. So when your mind is fully developed as Buddha, that's what they call the Dharmakaya, means truth body. That's the meaning of the word Buddha. The meaning of the word Buddha is pure, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-compassionate, all-wise. You've gone way beyond bodies, baby. You do not need bodies. You're finished with bodies, well and truly by that point. That's the Dharmakaya. That's the actual meaning of Buddha. Now, what's caused you to become a Buddha is incredible compassion. And poor sentient beings, peanuts like you and me, can't communicate with that. So what does that Buddha mind do? It manifests in bodies. That's called Rupakaya, form body. And there's 2 of those. One is the Nirmanakaya, or the emanation body, which is the one that you and I can see. That's Shakyamuni Buddha, the human being back then whose mind was a Buddha mind, who manifested in the human body to be able to teach people. You're walking around India, we say, oh, there's Buddha. We go, look at the statue, oh, there's Buddha. Excuse me, if you'd been in India at that time, you'd see it. The place was crawling in sadhus with their yellow robes, looking no different from each other. Buddha didn't have a big sign on his head saying, I'm Buddha. So it's like now when you meet teachers, gurus, that's what they call, you check up on them. So Buddha says, don't believe what I tell you, check up on me. But we go, oh, there's Buddha, as if we know, because he looks all golden and nice in his statue, right? You couldn't have told the difference back then. So that Buddha mind doesn't need a body, but they manifest in bodies that you and I can see. That's the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. And there's they call the supreme emanation body, which is the one of the founding Buddha of this time. But you could argue that Buddha's manifesting. So the lowest level bodhisattva, there are 10 stages of bodhicitta before you become a Buddha. The lowest level bodhisattva can manifest their mind simultaneously in 100 different forms to be of benefit to sentient beings, driven by their insane compassion. Each step up the way, those 10 bhumis, you multiply to the point where you're a Buddha, and I know this sounds like science fiction, but this is Buddha's view. You are capable of, and you will be spontaneously manifesting your mind in countless bodies throughout countless universes for countless eons for the sake of countless sentient beings, as long as they're suffering. That's your job, driven by your compassion. Now you've got another kind of body that we can't see. That's the one that's depicted in all the tantric Buddhas. Tara, these ladies and gentlemen with many arms and legs and naked and looking cute and scary. There are countless numbers of these, and this is called the enjoyment body. This is a subtler form that only the Arya bodhisattvas can communicate with, those who've realized emptiness. Like, for example, Tsongkhapa, he took all his teachings directly from Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, in his subtle orange body, Some holy beings like Kadrila, that student of Rinpoche's, Kadrila, that female Lama, who was also Lama Zopa's guru. I was the teacher at Kopan in 2019. Lama Zopa asked each person, a Westerner, to teach the course, a foreigner, and I was the person for 2019. And during that time, Kadrila was there, and Rinpoche said, I've got my first lady guru, he said. So she's his guru and he's her guru. It was very nice, they're kind of mutual. She's been making many helpful and big decisions about Rinpoche lately. So Kadala. So anyway, when she first came out of Tibet, there's all these marvelous stories about her. Lama Zopa said she was born as Vajrayogini. She didn't do any study. She just had all the knowledge was there, you know. So when she came out of Tibet as a little girl, she wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. She was desperate to get to meet the Dalai Lama. And so she used to hang around Dharamsala, and people thought she was just a crazy little girl, you know. She was, because every time she'd see the Dalai Lama, she'd see him in the Sambhogakaya form and she'd kind of faint. She'd see this subtle light body, you know, Chen raising. So one day she had a meeting with Kirti Sancham Rinpoche, and he could recognize who she was. He said, "I will build a golden bridge between you and the Dalai Lama," he said. So he introduced her to him, and the Dalai Lama told his monks, to do whatever this little girl said. So she organized this big long life puja and things like that, you know. I think she was 12 or 13, I don't remember how old, young girl. So also she wanted to give a special gift to His Holiness during this puja. So she went to some cave there of Tilopa or one of these yogis, and she asked the monks to give her a little container. She got the container and she found this rock, and she squeezed the rock and yellow nectar came out, and she offered it to His Holiness and he drank the lot. These lovely stories. Anyway, so the Nimanakaya, the emanation body, is the one that we can see, if we're fortunate, you know. Who looks like us and talks like us, and that's the guru, that's the one we need. Then the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, is depicted in Tantra, basically, all these, and basically, you know, like a family tree, you've got Dharmakaya, mind, then down you've got Rumakaya, then two of those, Nimanakaya and that's Shakyamuni Buddha. In the Sutra teachings, effectively, there's one. In the Tantra, you've got 5 Buddha families, Vajradhara or Doji Chung. There's a tantric aspect of Shakyamuni, and that's it, because it's in the Mahayana and it's a whole different kettle of fish. Funny word to say for this. It's like a whole different level. This is where the Shakyamuni, have a look at that form, you know, it's a manifestation of discipline, body, speech, and mind, which is the manifestation of the Lamrim. The manifestation of subdued body, speech, and mind. The manifestation of the first and second scopes. Disciplined body, speech, and mind. Subdued, disciplined. Then you've got Tantra, which is another whole kettle of fish, which is where you are transforming delusions into the path. It's more advanced. So basically you've got Vajradhara, this radiant manifestation in that, and then you've got underneath him is the 5 Buddha families, Amitabha, Akshobhya, these 5, and they each represent different psychological transformed delusions. So Amitabha is the manifestation of transformed attachment. Then under him are all the other hundreds of Buddhas that are in the Amitabha family. Then you've got Akshobhya, who's the transformation of anger. Then all the other Buddhas are a manifestation of those qualities. So it's like this map of psychology, basically, but there's manifesting as these different Sambhogakaya, these different forms of the Buddha in subtle level. So they have an environment in which they live as well, and that's a pure land. Each one has their own environment, their own pure land. And that's what's visible to the high Arya bodhisattvas, you know. All right? Okay. So back to this. So Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava mentions this, that we need to be born in a pure land, ideally, best. In many of his teachings, Lama Tsongkhapa says that we should pray to be born, especially in Amitabha's pure land, Dewachen, Sukhavati, because it's easy for us ordinary people, those with delusions, meaning not with realizations, like an Arya Bodhisattva, to be born there. I was surprised by that. In his texts, in a text, Tsongkhapa says, when reciting prayers to be born in the pure lands of the Buddha, one should mainly focus on rebirth in Sukhavati. In fact, one of the 8 prayers to benefit the dead that are traditionally recited in our Gelugpa monasteries is the prayer to be born in the blissful realm of Amitabha Buddha. So because I'm a fan now, I've decided I'm going to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land, and one of the main causes is wanting it. We'll go into that. When I go to sleep, my head hits the pillow, and I turn on that prayer, and I have my own voice reciting that prayer to myself as I go to sleep. If you pray to be there, you'll definitely be born there, blah, blah, blah. It's not easy to be born in most pure lands. There are numberless pure lands. As many Buddhas as there are, as many environments of these Buddhas, you know? That's how they talk. where you can practice Tantra and achieve enlightenment. There's Vajrayogini and Haruka's Pure Land, where you can definitely become enlightened. And then there's Tushita, Maitreya Buddha's Pure Land. And of course, you can be prayed to be born in Shambhala, a place related to Kala Chakra. But to be born in many of these Pure Lands is difficult. So for some, you need to have achieved the 8th Bodhisattva level of the Mahayana path. And to be born in some of the lower Pure Lands, you need to have cut the ego, the ignorance holding the I as truly existent. It's difficult. If you don't have these realizations, even if you still have delusions, your prayer to go to these Pure Lands won't succeed. But basically, you can be born in Sukhavati. That's the point. So what the causes, the main causes, are wanting to go there, stating it, which is really very surprising because we don't think like that. But intention, you see, intention, if you want to think about what the meaning, real meaning of karma is, it's the mental decision, intention, I will, I want, may. So what's the main cause of you getting an ice cream? Guess what? I want an ice cream. Everything leads from there. If you're sitting there thinking, I want a cup of tea, you don't walk into the ice cream shop. You're in trouble. Everything starts with the mind. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. But we don't believe this. We just believe the whole world is pulling us from pillar to post. We're a bunch of victims. We've got to realize we're in charge. Do you understand? I had to come here to North Carolina, so I had to first want to. When I got invited, when Donna wrote, I had to say, yes, I will go. Do you understand? I didn't say, no, I won't go, and then bought a ticket. No, I'm in trouble. I had to say first, I will go. Then that's good, that's a start. But you don't just say, I want an ice cream and wait for it to come. You got to go get the ice cream. You stand up and you walk to the ice cream store. I stood up and I had to create the causes to get a ticket. Buy my ticket and buy this and organize a taxi, pack my bag, and then I get there. It's not rocket science. That's how you go to a Pure Land. That's how you get whatever you want. We are in charge. This is the meaning of karma. Okay, maybe I want to come to North Carolina, but there's no money, which means I can want it, but I haven't got the rest of the conditions together. Or maybe the ice cream shop is closed. But you've got to start with the intention. And that's many of the prayers we do are like that. May this happen, and may that happen, and please do this, and may this, and may I this, and may this, and may this. It's intention, not motivation, intention. It's the meaning, mental karma, mental action, intention. It's super powerful. The more we know that, the more we realize we have to know what we want. Our trouble is, even as an ordinary life, we might know you want to go to France for a weekend. Or let's say, Donna rings up, Robina, there's an amazing teaching in France, do you want to come this weekend? Normally we go, oh no, can't do that. No, hubby won't approve, the kids won't approve, I've got no money, no, not possible, sorry Donna. Rubbish. The first thing is to go, I want to go to France. Then you see if it's possible. But intention has to, in a real sense in our daily lives, it really means having the courage to know what you want and to say it and state it and then see if it's possible. Maybe it's not possible, but we cut ourselves off at our knees by saying, no, not possible. I can't do that. Oh no, not possible. We're full of fear, Intention, it drives everything. You have to know you want to kill your father, but it doesn't mean you follow it. But you have to know it. If you hide it away and suddenly you find yourself stabbing your daddy, oh, I didn't know I wanted that. It's because you hid it. You better know it, then you can decide what to do about it. And that's, of course, not do it. That's why we have to know our minds. Do you understand me, people? Intention. So anyway, everything exists on the tip of the wish, blah. So anyway, whatever. That's it. That'll do, just to tell you that. So the main cause is to want, and then to create the causes. And the causes to get here is an air ticket, taxi, a few things like that. Causes to get there are intention, see the benefits, and then to practice virtue, practice morality, practice bodhicitta. Isn't it? And then you have that cause. You create that cause, you program your mind with that. Like that. What time is it? 3 o'clock. Are there any questions, please? Any questions, please? Now, questions, yes, come on. We've said a bunch of things. Yes.
This may just be a matter of semantics, or maybe there is a clear distinction, but usually when we begin meditation, We either set our intentions or we set our motivation. I've come to think of those as synonymous, but you said, no, it's not motivation, it's intention. What is the difference?
Okay, I understand you. I know in the teachings it talks about, when you talk about karma, talk about intention, it divides into the thought to do it and then the delusion and then the motivation. But technically, intention, okay. In the mind, remember we discussed there's 3 categories of states of mind. The first lot are the deluded neurotic ones. And you've got the 3 poisons there: attachment, ignorance, and anger. And then under those, all the others. There's all the other neurotic states of mind. Thousands of them. They all stem from those 3. They're rooted in those 3. And they are in their nature delusional, ridiculous, exaggerated, distorted, and the cause of suffering. Then you've got the virtues: love, compassion, kindness, generosity, forgiveness. Then you've got the stuff that I call the mechanical parts of the mind, which we mentioned when we discussed Mahamudra, that are neither neurotic and deluded and non-virtuous nor positive, but they are necessary states of mind. And that's the idea we've got to get used to. So you've got intention. It's one of the 5 always present mental factors, which is the thought, I will. It's bare bones, I will. It's volition. It's that without that, nothing happens. That's intention. That's the meaning of intention. It's the meaning of karma, mental action. You start with intention. It's not virtuous and it's not non-virtuous. It's, it's I will. And then underneath that, it's then, if it's an action to be a benefit to others, I will do this, is neither good nor bad. What makes it good or bad is the motivation. Do you understand me? So in other words, you could say, even with say, killing, a typical action of killing would be an intention to kill the mouse, and then the motivation would be anger. But if you've got compassion, then that completely changes the action you do. The intention's still there, I will kill the mouse. But in this case, because you think the mouse is suffering and you want to help it, maybe you're deluded and you don't. You chuck it into from the frying pan into the fire because you don't know karma, but you meant well. So your motivation of compassion infused, your intention is infused with compassion, or your intention is infused with anger. It's the motivation that is the one that gives the character to the actions we do. Intention is neither good nor bad. Can you hear that? It's got no character to it. It's just I will, volition. And it's one of the 5 always present mental factors: intention, attention, discrimination. These are all neither negative nor positive. Mindfulness, example, we can give a big bunch of meaning to mindfulness in the world. It's got all these bells and whistles on it. Technically, it's one of these mechanical states of mind that is simply the ability, part of your mind, that notices you've wandered off from the topic of meditation, or you're doing the cake and you get distracted. And mindfulness is the ability to catch that you've wandered off and to bring you back to what you're doing. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. So mindfulness in its nature is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. It's why you're using it that makes it virtuous or non-virtuous. So contact, intention, attention, discrimination, concentration, mindfulness, these are all in this mechanical, if you like, I call it that, states of mind that are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. So it depends upon the motivation for why you're doing what you're doing that makes them useful or not. So in other words, a sniper needs intention to kill. It needs really good discrimination. I've got to kill Fred, not Mary, because discrimination is part of your mind working every second, discriminating between this and that. He needs concentration so he doesn't lose the plot. So they're all necessary whether you're an evil person or a good person. So the motivation is what gives the character. But there's all these states of mind that are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're crucial. They're necessary to function. You get my point? So intention is really the meaning of karma, meaning action, meaning mental action. The hand is just the servant. The hand does the stealing. But it's the mind that intends to steal, driven by attachment, and then the hand does the job. So actions of body and speech create karma. But if you could say, if your foot stands on that ant, but there's no awareness of the ant, there's no intention to kill the ant, therefore there's no motivation. They say there's some kind of semblance of some karmic imprint in the mind, but you could argue there's almost no negative karma there. How could there be? Equally, if you're walking past a homeless person You're not aware of the homeless person. There's no thought to give. There's no generosity. There's nothing. But the $20 falls out of your pocket and the homeless person gets $20. But you created no karma. Of course you didn't. Your mind wasn't involved in it. So motivation can change. You can, you'd kill your cat with compassion. It doesn't help the cat at all. They probably go to the lower realms, but it helps you. But, it's not good motivation is not enough. Compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. So compassion is a virtue, and that gives the character to an action. Attachment and anger are non-virtues, and they give the character to an action if they are the motivation. But intention is bare bones, I will. Do you understand? Often when they describe the 4 components of a complete action in karma, they will say so the first one is there has to be the object there, let's say the mouse. The second one, they often just simply call it intention, and they divide it into 2. One is the delusion that causes you to do it, and then there is what's the other one? Often they use it like an equivalent of compassion, but I think it's really confusing to do that. Intention is not virtuous or non-virtuous. There are many states of mind like that. Can you hear that? And the only way to understand that is because we don't think like this in psychology in the West. We don't think this way, We don't categorize things in terms of negative and positive and neutral. And neutral here, that's why I call mechanical, because neutral sounds like they're not important. It doesn't mean that. Are you with me? Good. I'm very clear. Communicating people? That's all we have to know our minds. See, each second there's all this stuff going on, be able to analyze and locate and identify all the different parts of our mind, all working together to do our action. That's the real job of being a Buddhist, to know your mind intimately, each of the steps, each of the parts of your mind, to recognize which parts you have to grow strong, which parts you have to weaken. It's very powerful. That's why you've got to have concentration, Any other questions? Yes and yes. Yes. Back first. Go.
I actually have 3 questions.
Good, sweetheart, go.
Maybe 4. Okay. First of all, I'm assuming clear light and Buddha nature are the same.
No.
Okay, good.
First question. Okay.
Different.
So clear light mind is a name given to what they call extremely subtle mind. It's the subtlest level of I like to say mind is the capacity for cognition. That's what it is. So clear light mind or extremely subtle mind is the subtlest level of your mind. After all the other levels have gone and disappeared, more subtle, and then eventually that's what leaves the body. So your Buddha nature is referring actually, conventional Buddha nature is referring to the fact that the process of becoming a Buddha, that you possess the potential to change your mind. But the ultimate Buddha nature is, in fact, the emptiness of your mind. And what that means is that because your mind is a dependent arising, because your mind is empty of existence from its own side, it therefore is not set in stone and can become a Buddha. But simply speaking, Buddha nature is referring to the natural potential in your mind to turn it into a Buddha mind. It's referring to your potential. It's not referring to the mind itself. Okay, so a simple example, I would like to use the example of a seed, like an acorn. So what's an acorn, mummy? You don't know what it is and you can't tell. So she has to point out to you, it's a seed that if you put it together with a bunch of other conditions and give it a bit of time, it'll turn into an oak tree, and she'll point to the oak tree. So a way of saying that is that all acorns, by definition, possess oak tree nature. It's just a way of talking. We don't talk like that. So every acorn, you agree, don't you, that an acorn will produce an oak tree? That means if it is an acorn, it possesses the potential to be an oak tree. And as long as it exists, that's its main nature. That's its potential. Minds are like that. Buddha has found that every mind, that all the delusions in the mind are not at the core of our being and can be removed, and that the virtues in the mind can be perfected. Then that's Buddhahood, and every mind possesses that potential. And the term used to refer to that potential is we all possess Buddha nature.
Okay, so when you talked about the dissolution, I had not ever heard before the dissolution.
Go a bit close to the mic.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I hadn't heard the 5 wisdoms being part of the dissolution.
Yes, it is, yes. It's
Before-
divided, there's 25 components altogether in those 8 stages.
So those 5 wisdoms,
Yes.
I thought, would exist in Buddha nature, but so you've
You
got
know that
those
we've all got them
wisdoms
in the
inherent?
ordinary. We've got the capacity to, we've got the capacity. The first one is called mirror-like wisdom. When it's perfected, it is that one, yes. And it's not part of Buddha nature. It's part of your mind when it's a Buddha. But we've all got the beginnings of that. And so it's functioning every second that you're able to see many different things all at once. That's the particular function of your mind called mirror-like wisdom.
Okay, so when that's dissolving in the dissolution, what's happening there?
Gradually you're losing the plot.
Okay,
So first of all, your eyes go,
Right.
that wisdom starts to go, so you start to lose the plot and can't discriminate between this and that. Less and less appears to you, things become very vague and wishy-washy. Your earth starts to go, so your body gets heavy. And then these things, you're gradually, the bits and pieces that are all functioning as a living being are starting to cease functioning.
yeah, but that seems to be saying the wisdom is there.
No, it is there, but
If it's
the way
dissolving.
it functions as an ordinary person ceases. But when you get another life, it starts again. Don't worry about it.
Okay. The other question I had was about when do you need to make that decision about a Pure Land? Maybe you want to try, going through the dissolution and seeing the clear light, or do you have to, too late now?
Honey child, if you get to that stage and know what you're doing, you have no worries. You'll go wherever you want. But most of us lose the plot by the time we even start to. If you can't go through the sleep process with complete control and get to the very subtle mind and meditate, then you can't get through death.
That was my other
Not a
question.
possibility.
Yeah. Do you have, should you work on lucid dreaming, lucid sleeping?
You can always try those things, but you can't be qualified at those until you've got high realizations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But no harm in practicing, Yeah, thanks. Yes, somebody here. Yes, yes.
Does the Buddha, or a Buddha, a bodhisattva, and maybe those who've reached nirvana, are they
Sorry, I
subject?
lost the sentence.
Is a Buddha, let's just go with Buddha, is a Buddha subject to karma? Do they have their own karma?
Okay. The whole idea of karma, this law of karma, is talking a conventional reality of ordinary sentient beings and how it's this law that runs us all. So we have to learn to be in charge of that and attempt not to harm and not to kill and not to lie and not to steal and so on and so forth. But eventually when you've perfected everything, you're beyond all this stuff. You can do what you like. You can manifest in 4 billion bodies anytime, anywhere, and you can do negative things. You can kill 1 million people. You can do what you like because your mind is totally omniscient, totally compassionate, totally wise, and can only ever function to be beneficial and wise and perfect. So from that point of view, Buddhas are not in the normal thing about karma, but in the simplest sense that when you're a Buddha, you've got a mind, and mind is impermanent. So every second of your mind, which is infinite wisdom and infinite compassion every second, it can't help but keep growing more wisdom and more compassion. But you don't need more, but it can only lead to more. It can never end in that sense. Your mind can never end because every second you're loving and compassionate. Cause and effect is playing out. Karma is a way of cause and effect playing out in ordinary people. So for the Buddha's mind, cause and effect is playing out because mind is impermanent. If it's impermanent, it's the product of cause and effect. But a Buddha can only do perfect causes and perfect effects, if you like. Put it like that.
So no negative karma?
Not possible. Way not possible. Way beyond that. At a very early stage, when you've realized emptiness, you've cut the root of ego grasping. You can't create more. You've got a lot more work to do to even achieve your own nirvana. Forget about Buddhahood. But you can't fall back after that. That's why realizing emptiness is absolutely fundamentally necessary. To cut the root of the root delusion, the root misconception that gives rise to attachment and aversion. You can't have more of those. But you've got masses of karma still to finish, left over from the past, but you can't create more because you've cut the root. Something like that, darling. I'm not being too accurate, but something like that. This business of emptiness is a crucial piece, a crucial turning point. Yeah. Something else. Yes, at the back there.
There's one question on Zoom,
Okay, go
I think.
back.
Nana, did you have a question?
Yes, Nana. Yes, sweetheart.
Nana?
Yes, I thought about one, but I'm not sure if I can phrase it correctly. Like when we talk about the realization, the understanding that death is definite, does everybody will have it on the same level? Does everybody will understand it, exactly the same?
Well, honey, it's a bit like if you're practicing, if you and I have got a piano teacher and we're both trying to pass grade 1 in music, you could argue that pretty much we both achieved a certain goal of achieving grade 1. We'd be pretty similar, wouldn't we? You could argue that, because grade 1 is a way of defining a certain stage of development. But why are you asking? That's an intellectual question. Who cares? What's it mean? Why are you asking it? Who cares?
I don't know.
What's the point? No, darling, don't obsess about it. Who cares if other people have a similar realization? Why you ask that, Nana?
I don't know. I've been thinking that I guess just got lost in my thought thread. Because I'm trying. I've been.
Your thinking. Nana, can you try and keep your thinking focused? You're gonna die, babe. I don't know when. You don't know when. You're gonna die. So then think, wow, I better make the most of my precious life. That's the thing to try and train yourself to have. Don't suffocate the fears, but don't swim in them.
I'm trying to find the way to use them to kind of smash the ego.
Wait a minute.
The fears. The fear.
You're making it much too fancy. I just told you how. Just say to yourself, I will die. I don't know when. So conclusion, I want to make the most of this precious life. Do you have that thought? That's how you counteract. Just keep remembering that. What do you mean you try? Can you not say those words?
I mean, it's not always working.
What do you mean by working? What does working look like?
It looks like.
How would it look if it worked? If it worked, as you said it, what would you be feeling?
It gives the more, I don't know, spacious feeling, I guess.
No, but that's a fantasy. You're expecting too much. All you can do is what you can do. But stop being dissatisfied with what you've achieved. Just be content with what you can do and just keep moving. Don't expect more.
Am I expecting?
It does work. Every time you play the piano at your grade 1 level, it is working. You're not Mozart yet, but you be happy with the level you've accomplished. And then you go back and you play again tomorrow, and you play the next day, and you keep getting better at it. Be content with what you've accomplished.
Yeah, even if we don't see the results like immediately.
You've already gone off the plot. What do you mean by seeing the result? The result is when you become Mozart. So you're going one step at a time. Be content with your limited level of realization. This is where you're at. And then tomorrow you think about it and you get a bit better. And the next day you think about it and it gets a bit better. It's a process. It's an ongoing, organic, logical process. Be content with each step of the way. What more can you do?
I don't know. Probably push harder doesn't work, so yeah.
I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon?
I said probably push harder doesn't work, so just be content, yeah. Just be content.
Yeah, pushing is ridiculous. If you push yourself to try and be grade 2 when you're only in grade 1, you'll have a mental breakdown. So that means be content with you being in grade 1. Be humble. A bit more humility and kindness to yourself, Nana. This is all of us. Okay? Yes? Yes? No?
Yes.
Do your best. Keep moving, baby. What else, people? 3:20.
There's another question online, Venerable.
Yeah, go.
The question is, in determining the causes for a fortunate rebirth, is one's state of mind at death more important?
Is one's what?
One's state of mind at death more important than one's thoughts, words, and deeds throughout life?
I think that's like asking. Okay, let's ask it. Is the way I drive the car in my driving test more important than all the practice I've done? Well, it's a bit intellectual. You can't ask that question. The driving test is the proof of the pudding, isn't it? If you drive well every day, then the driving test will be really good. Yeah, because theoretically you could say you've lived a very negative life and got lots of negative imprints in the mind, but then at some point your virtue is able to ripen and your death will be very beautiful and you'll get a blissful life. That's totally possible. Equally, you could say you've practiced virtue and then suddenly some heavy-duty karma ripens and a negative karma could ripen. That's not impossible. But it's not random. That's the thing, we've got to be really understanding the process. It's not random. It's not random. That's why we just have confidence in each step of the way, practicing. Because as Lamaya says, karma takes care. And because we don't know our own karma, I mean, you could look at someone, like I got some, like a friends in prison when I first started working in the prisons in the 90s, like these Mexican guys, these gangsters, murderers and rapists. You could say they were murderers and rapists. So on the face of it, you just saw a gangster murdering and raping. But when they got into prison, they start to grow their virtue. So, of course, the guards and the people don't believe a word of it. But it was clear, you could see they had all these virtuous qualities, but that they didn't notice and nobody else noticed, and they were hiding behind the gangster rapist. So that's a possibility. So the virtue was there. But the thing is, if you're pretending to be good, if you're pretending to be virtuous, then you can't fool. Karma can't be fooled. Karma is a logical process. So my feeling is if you really do practice every day, sincerely, all of these things, according to the instructions, according to the methodology that Buddha has laid out, and our teachers have laid out, then karma will take care. It will be fine. You've got to have, so in other words, instead of thinking, I know I've studied botany for years, well, then what if I put the wrong thing in the ground, like panic attack, But when you know botany, it gives you an answer to how to fix it. When there's a natural law, we're so fearful about karma, but you're going to build a 100-story building. If you know engineering, you know all the rules, you know mathematics, you know architecture, you don't constantly every day have a panic attack. We might put the wrong screws in, it'll all collapse. You know the laws and you follow the laws and you have confidence, step by baby step. If you think you know the laws of botany, you won't get a garden. So it's really, karma is logical. And like any natural law, you learn it and trust it. So I think then karma death will be great. It used to be logical. Got to have confidence. We keep sort of expecting negative karmas to pop up and throw us, you understand? It's not like that. Karma takes care. You have to keep remembering it's a logical law. It's logical. It's logical. It's logical. It's natural. It's not run by anybody. It's not punishment. It's not reward. It's a natural law. I find that very practical to remember. We're so afraid of it. We're so fearful, Anyway, whatever. Time to go. No, it's half an hour. Talk to me. What else? Yes. Yes. Where? Yes, sweetheart, go, talk.
How's the perception of time in the brain after all the senses are lost?
Well, the brain's dead, so there's no time, there's no sense of the brain is not functioning now. The brain is over. The brain is finished. The mind, the consciousness, like these experiences that Chip had and Carmen had, or the experience I mentioned of the guy who had the vision of going down the hallway. Probably 1 minute was that experience, but he felt like it was incredibly long time. So I think the way we experience time through our brain and daily life, we can get a feeling for how a half an hour feels. We can feel how 20 minutes feel, But I think also that depends, isn't it, on if you've got a lot of pain, unbearable pain, it could feel like hours when it's only 10 minutes. Isn't it? So it really is quite a subjective thing. We can follow the clock, but our experience of time, I think even in ordinary life, is very different depending on whether it's pleasure or pain. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very much a conventional thing, the way we clock it with minutes and seconds and our experience of it, you know. So I think it's like that. What to say?
And I have a second question. In our religions, there are examples, for instance, of prophets that are taken to heaven and their bodies are supposed to go along with them. There's also cases of resurrection, right? I'm talking about bodily resurrection.
Yes.
So how are we supposed to interpret those?
I think from the Buddhist point of view, it wouldn't be possible for the body that has now turned into dirt in the ground to manifest again. It would be a body that looks like that, but that's another bunch of karma ripening. You could argue that it can't be the same body. That's not wouldn't fit with this understanding of, you know, physical matter just disintegrates, you know, so it can't reverse. So if you do get a body, the only way to describe it from the Buddhist perspective is that you create, due to karma, you've created the cause to have another body that looks like that one. Maybe it's the only way to say it. I don't know. Do you understand? Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. What else, people? So we didn't go through the 8 stages. We did roughly. Yeah. No, but I want to finish the 8 stages. A few more things to say that are very fascinating. Yeah. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did go roughly. Yes.
If you are reborn in the Pure Land, can you become enlightened there? Is that what I heard you say?
That's the point. Yeah, most of the Pure Lands are hard to get to because you've got to be already highly realized. But what Lama Zopa is saying is that Amitabha's Pure Land is where ordinary people can go, and the only reason to go is to get enlightened quickly. Because you've got a subtle light body, you don't need food and sex and drugs and rock and roll and sleep, so you can get enlightened quickly.
Gotcha.
You understand?
Yeah.
Yes.
And can you have the choice then to go back?
Oh,
and
absolutely,
have
and then you
other-
would, because you're bodhisattva and you become a Buddha, then it's easily able to come back and be useful. That's the whole point of it. It's like a waiting station, and we get enlightened quickly and then come back and be useful. The idea of, sometimes that's why I was a bit cynical. There's like a lot of people, Chinese Buddhism, there's Amitabha Buddhists or something, and they really treat it like an alternative to heaven. You go there so you can be happy. So this approach, the Mahayana one, which makes sense to me from Lama Zopa's talk, is a place to get enlightened quickly, so then you can come back and be ordinary and help other people. Help all the crazies, help all the humans, the dogs and the ants and the scorpions. Yes. Go on, people. So let me go through the 8 stages. I forget what I said. I sort of said some things. Yeah, I did. A little bit. Yeah, I did. I got to where you stop breathing, and then the white one, and then the red one, and then you get to the clear light mind. These different things happen at each stage. But then what happens is your mind can take up to 3 days to leave the body. But when it does leave the body, it leaves through different places. And this can be an indication of the type of rebirth you get. So they say if it leaves through the crown, you get born in a Pure Land, and that's why at the time of death you tap very strongly there, or you pull the hair. I didn't finish that. You pull the hair very strongly at the crown chakra, or you tap very strongly, and that could encourage the consciousness to leave from the heart to go up the central channel and out through the crown. That would be very advantageous. If your consciousness leaves through the eyes, you're born as a human. Or put it this way, if you've got the karma to be born a human, your consciousness will leave through the eyes. If you've got the karma to be born a hungry ghost or a spirit, it'll leave through the mouth. If you've got the karma to be born in the lower realm, the animal realm, it'll go through the penis or the vagina. And if you're going to be born as the hell realms, I think it goes through the anus, something like that, I think. Something like that, I think. But you can't tell. It's hard to tell because you can't see where the consciousness is leaving. So when it leaves the body, that second it leaves this red and white drop at the heart chakra, the red and white drop that came from your mummy and daddy, then those drops leave through the sex organ or through the nose. And the consciousness, that second, then goes through the reverse 8 stages, and you kind of wake up in like a dream state. That's what a bardo is. That's what an intermediate state is. It's like a dream state. And depending on the karma you created, it can be very intense or very joyful, but very confusing. Like mostly dreams are kind of confusing, aren't they? And then when let's say you got the karma to be born as a human, then you're hanging around in that bardo. They say for up to like 7 human weeks it can be, or it can be just 1 second. And then when your new mummy and daddy hop into bed, you run like a magnet, and you then join the egg and sperm and start your new life. That's roughly it. Any questions about that? No? Yes?
Is the bardo also affected by our karma at the time of death?
Everything we experience is the fruit of past karma. There's nothing that isn't the fruit of karma. So everything you do in the bardo also is creating karma, because you're an ordinary sentient being, yes. So there's lots of fear and anguish and negativity, then you're creating karma.
Is that affected by the way that we die? Like, if we throw
The bardo you experience, the way you experience the bardo, how it is for you, is very much dependent on the karmic seed that was triggered before you stop breathing, that determines your future life. So if you're going to have a suffering rebirth, the bardo will be like a terrible nightmare. If you're going to be born human, it'll still be kind of weird, but it won't be so unpleasant. That's how they talk. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the bardo can be very short. And if you have a violent death, you probably take rebirth almost immediately. You know, let's say like that. And of course, it's going to be a lower realm rebirth death. There's no waiting around. There's plenty of animals and insects and hell beings available. You know, it's harder to get a human body. You know, that's how they say. And yeah, it's something like that. What else, people? Maybe that'll do for today. Yes, we don't.
Super low realms? Like, what do you do?
Oh, sweetheart, hope. I understand. Of course, because that's what they say keeps the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas perky and optimistic, is that as long as there is a consciousness existing, because consciousnesses are beginningless and endless, as long as it's existing, it always possesses Buddha nature. So even though you're in the suffering realm, it won't last forever. It'll run out eventually. And one of your virtuous karmic seeds, which is sitting there latent in your mind, will then be triggered and you'll get a decent birth again. So the very high, powerful beings can also help other beings in these other realms of existence, you know? Yeah. So there's always hope here. There's always hope. That's the way to put it. There's always hope, yes. Yes. Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
My husband was a student of awareness when he had cancer, and we came back to Raleigh. He was at the Kadampa Center those years ago, and when he died at 35.
Wow.
The time frame, I don't remember. It was certainly within a year. But I found myself in dream time, sitting at a pond in a beautiful woodland, cross-legged, and Steve was sitting across the pond, and we were each using our focused intent to create flowers and animals, and it was serene. And then I said, I wish we could have had more time together on the other side.
On the other side, what does that mean? Sorry.
Life together.
But where were you when you were having this conversation? I'm a bit confused.
In dream time, but perhaps
What do you mean
not.
by dream time?
And as I wrap the story,
Yeah.
you'll have more perspective. And he smiled and nodded, yes, I know. And he was infinitely serene. I had a great sadness, but I felt love. And as I wake up,
Oh, I see. Okay, go on.
yeah, as I wake up, I hear the word that I did not know before this.
Yeah.
Bardo, bardo, bardo.
Oh,
And
I
then
see.
I
How
wake up.
interesting. There you go. That's interesting. How long after? So he had died by now.
Yeah.
How long after he died did this happen?
Probably within months.
Yeah, well, that technically here, all I can tell you is what I know. I don't know much. Bardo lasts no more than 7 weeks. And also, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, and this is where it really, there's so many stories that people tell, including what you said of somebody, and the other woman said about someone giving a message from her husband and that kind of thing. This, I can't work out the answers based on this model, but I only know this model. All I can do is give the answers to what I know, which is that the second your mind leaves the body, Lama Zopa says, even you can see the body, the karma is completely finished and you have no interest in going back and you don't even recognize it. But these kinds of stories and people speaking to their loved ones seems to contradict that. So I don't really know what to say about that. But that's an interesting experience. I can't argue with the experience.
Except that I said in that space, I know that I have to leave and go back.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah,
Good.
and then I wake up.
And you were able to wake up. There you go. So I think there's so many, there's so many levels of reality. It's very interesting to have. Yeah, it's a very nice story. Thank you for telling us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sweetheart. What else was there? Somebody else?
Yeah,
go
a
on.
couple of different students have questions on Zoom.
Yeah, go.
First one is, if there is there more karma to purify after realization of emptiness? Can suffering occur after the realization?
Yes, suffering can still occur for sure, but you don't, because you realize emptiness is a different whole thing. You don't create more, you clean it up. And that's really all the leftover residual results of other stuff. Eventually, when all that's gone completely and all the obscurations are removed from the mind, that's when you don't need to come back. Yeah, exactly. Or if you're on the Mahayana path, you want to come back because you want to benefit others. You have bodhicitta, I don't know all the labels of the stages. I haven't studied it enough. But the crucial turning point is when you cut the root of ego grasping, which means you no longer buy into the assumption of an intrinsic me, therefore no longer have attachment to the me and aversion when it doesn't get what you want, and so on and so forth. You still got stuff left over, and even subtle delusions. I mean, you've got to have bodhicitta to make all the delusions go away. You can achieve nirvana, your cessation of suffering, where you don't need to be reborn, but you've still got more work to do if you want to be a Buddha, because a Buddha is 1 billion times more powerful than if you've achieved nirvana, because you add bodhicitta to the mix, which makes it much more powerful. But the crucial point is from the time of the first direct non-conceptual insight into emptiness, you can't fall back. So that's why I always like to say we've had concentration, samadhi, these amazing states of mind, these incredible levels of realizations, clairvoyance, unbelievable things. But we're still in samsara. We're still in samsara. Only when you've finished, you're out of samsara. Then you've got more work to do to clean up the old stuff and then to move forward. Yeah, something like that.
And the student followed up with, how would I know the difference between an experience and the realization of emptiness?
Well, that's a little bit like asking, how do I know when I've accomplished grade 1 in music? Well, like grade 17. You got the wisdom based on all your practice to know that you've actually accomplished it. And if you don't know you've accomplished grade 17, you're in serious trouble. It's got to come with some inner awareness, doesn't it? You've got to be confident, because there you are. At grade 1, you've got to keep referring to your teacher. But grade 17, you've got enough inner wisdom and you know what you've accomplished. You know it. If you don't know it, then you haven't accomplished it. In other words, how do I know if I'm right when it comes to maths? Well, if you don't know you're right, you're not right. How do I know that I'm right when I say 1 + 1 is 2? You've got wisdom. So it has to come with the wisdom to know. If it doesn't, then you haven't achieved it. It's like schizophrenic. It's ridiculous. Do you understand? Yeah. That's why we can delude ourselves. That's interesting, because many people have these experiences. Many people have experiences like powerful, what they call spiritual experiences. Sometimes for days and weeks they can last, when you feel like you're completely enlightened, you're totally blissful, you're seeing things, everything seems crystal clear, it feels like you've realized emptiness, and then you crash and it all goes. You are completely delusional, because we don't have the reference point for what a realization is. And then we get devastated because we lost it and want to get it back again. I hear many stories like that. That's just because you've done practice in the past and you get it, and some karma ripen, you've got a taste of it again. But you have to practice it again to get it back to be perfect. It's a bit like, you've got a very strong connection with music and you've never learned the theory, but you sit at the piano and you play something really beautiful. And I'll say, oh, please play it again. Well, you can't. It was like an accident. We tend to think that spiritual experiences are like that, like this flash that happens. But it has to be coherent. When you realize that piece of music, you can play it every time. That's what realization means. But we think it's a flash, you know. Oh, I played amazing music. I had a realization of music. No, you didn't. You had a momentary taste of it because you've done it before. You understand? So it comes with wisdom. It's not mystical. Yeah. Yes.
So you said earlier that you do the prayer to be born into the Pure Land.
Amishabha's Pure Land, yeah.
You also mentioned that you did it in your own voice and you play it back.
Yeah, I've got my prayers on my iPod and I listen to them.
Okay. Is that just a personal choice, or is it
just
make
my
it more
personal
powerful?
choice?
Okay. And what is the name of the prayers? Can you say it again? I'm sorry. Is it?
Yeah, I
just
can
called-
send it to you. I can send it as a PDF and put it in the chat.
Okay.
It's a prayer written by Lama Tsongkhapa, about 10 minutes. It's quite a few verses. It's a prayer written by Tsongkhapa. Lots of aspirations of being born in a pure land and only this and may I meet this and blah, blah, blah. Lots of things. Lots of nice little aspirational prayers, you know. I can put on the, put on the chat. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, sweetheart. What else? Time to go home. Yes, darling.
So when we're in the bardo, and you say we're heading towards the mommy and daddy.
The new birth, yes.
The new birth.
That you've already programmed, yeah.
Is there a choice, or is there?
No.
No.
I mean, listen, if you are at the level of choice, you won't be in a bardo, I promise you. Lama Zopa doesn't need to go to a bardo because he's in charge. He's a high being who's accomplished levels of realizations that he knows exactly what he's doing. He goes exactly where he wants, when he wants, and how he wants. The very fact of a bardo is we don't have a choice. We're stuck there. It's a fruit of karma, and we're waiting patiently for new mummy and daddy to come along. So if you've got realizations, then it's completely different. We don't have realizations. We don't have, I mean, if you can control going to sleep and control all your dreams, then you've got realizations. But we don't. We just they happen to us, you know.
So if you have the karma for a human rebirth, that just happens. You're going towards the mommy and daddy. There's no choice. It's just something.
It's a question of the karma that, okay. You're like asking, you sowed a seed for a rose, you put it in the ground. Do I have a choice for it to be an apricot tree? Well, how stupid, of course not. A rose seed was planted. So if you're asking, is there a possibility the karma can change? That's the better question. But saying, is there choice? There's no choice.
Okay, so if the karma changes.
It can change, yes, definitely. By doing certain practices, certain things can happen for sure. Yes. Yes, it can change. But pretty much, if everything's just going along as it is, it'll be like that. But you can, let's say you die and there's a negative karma that was triggered and you're going to be having a very suffering rebirth. Well, if someone does lots of prayers and contacts all the yogis and the meditators and the Dalai Lama, they do all these masses of prayers, and you've got the merit to be helped, you can be helped for the karma to shift. Yes.
Thank you.
That's a better question. Yes. Thank you. That's good. Because choice is a very interesting word, isn't it? Choice sounds very rational. You understand? Until we're highly realized, you could argue karma takes care. You sow the seed, you nourish it, it'll ripen. But choice means only if you're really advanced can you, because you've got all the means to choose. But karma can change, for sure. External things can help that change, definitely. Put it that way. But if you've got the choice, that means you're a highly realized being, which means you don't have a problem. Do you understand? Yes.
There's a question online.
Yeah.
Venerable. At the time of death, if we call on our root guru, can they appear to help us through the dying process?
Yeah, this is the whole thing about faith and devotion. Let's talk about that, okay? You see, whether you're a Hindu, whether you're religious, any kind of religious, what we call religious philosophy, you're a Hindu and you believe in all, you have faith in all these different beings, and you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or you're a Buddhist. There's talk, isn't there? In those philosophical views, there's this approach of having confidence in high beings. That's the one way of describing all of them, wouldn't you agree? And so a materialist wouldn't talk that way because they don't have faith in anybody who isn't in a physical body. So that's how it is. So faith and devotion are really powerful qualities. So it's the faith, so devotion. So what's devotion? Devotion is, my feeling, putting it simply, is that you know, I mean, forget dying. You've got a music teacher. You've seen their qualities. You know they care for you. They're teaching you how to be a musician. I'd say you have devotion in that music teacher. So I'd say even playing your music, forget dying, playing your music, and you think of your music teacher. You mightn't say you pray to your music teacher, but you think of your music teacher. Oh, please, Miss Jones, please help me play better. I guarantee it will help you. And what helps you is your mind. So much of the quality of prayer is your mind. It doesn't mean there aren't holy beings out there. And these holy beings do have the power. I mean, look at the story of Harry falling down the mountain, and Geshe Lama Kontrog's there and pushes him back up. No one can see him, but he felt it. And the woman, the nun who was with him, saw him reverse direction. You can't pretend. So that's Harry being virtuous, Harry being incredibly compassionate. He didn't think, oh, please save me. He had such powerful bodhicitta that was enough for him to create the cause to be saved. So the Buddha's view would be there are countless holy beings. Christians would call them one thing, Buddhism would call them another. They're real beings whose job is to be a benefit. So yes, having a connection with those beings, they will help you, guaranteed. But your mind is the one that does the work, you know. I would say your mind is the one that does the work. But for sure, yes, the answer is yes. That's the basis of most of the practices Rinpoche is talking about. Yeah. Well, there's that one about Judy, the one who's totally unconscious in the ICU, or the ER, what do they call it? I forget, ICU, I think, yeah. Totally unconscious. And I say to her, Judy, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen is praying for you. And they're the only words she remembers. I remember Geoffrey Hopkins, the Buddhist philosopher and translator. I remember in Mandala, when I first edited it back in the early 90s, I interviewed him after he'd got Lyme's disease. And he was totally unconscious, serious case of Lyme's disease. And they didn't think he'd come back into life whatsoever. And when he did come back, he had to learn to speak English again. He'd think, I want a cup of tea, but out of his mouth would come the word, you know, like completely confused. But he said in that coma that he was in, the only thing he could remember, could dredge out in his mind was, I think it was the Manjushri mantra, the mantra of wisdom, because his Lama said to him, never forget this mantra. He felt that saved him. So these stories like this, you hear this endlessly, Christian stories, Muslim stories, you know, it's, yeah, I think they're evident. They're evident, you know. Yeah. What, darling? Go.
Text. One of the texts that deals with this is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Is that a good text to study?
What's the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Is that, which one? Which one is that? Which book is that? You mean that? No, it's not that one. So I think it's one of those. I think I know the one you're talking about. It's one of these many texts about the bardo and things, isn't it?
About the bardo.
Yeah, but I think it's just like, it's for some reason became very popular in the West.
Yeah,
but it's one of the
70s,
thousands of
yeah.
texts in this genre. There's nothing particularly special as far as Tibetans. Most Tibetans have never heard of the text. So what about it? What's the question?
Would it be useful in preparing?
Oh,
for
I
death?
see. I think that kind of talk, and that happens a lot. I hear that among the Kargupas, different traditions. That basically, I think that kind of, where they talk about if this happens, you think this, and you don't believe in this, it's really talking to fairly advanced practitioners.
No. Yeah.
Because if you can't completely control your dreams, then you can't possibly control the bardo. So this is why the emphasis Lama Zopa puts is on living your life well, practicing virtue, practicing morality, practicing goodness, living in vows, thinking about impermanence, and then having faith and confidence at the time of your death and dying peacefully. Then you're on a roll. Then you're fine. But that, in a sense, it is an advanced practice to be able to be at the point of subtle mind and be able to transform all the appearances and this and that. I mean, that's advanced, I would suggest. Do you understand? Yeah. Yes. Yes, sweetheart.
I have a comment and a question. The comment I want to make is that I want to draw just attention to the thing that you recently said about prayer, and that is that you create the cause to be saved. I just think that is such an important phrase, to say you create the cause to be saved.
You mean in Harry's situation? That was Harry's situation.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's true.
Or in any situation.
No, it's true.
when
This
you're
is the
saved.
point. This is the point, Kim. This is the point when we really understand karma. When we have the view of devotion and we think I'm this pathetic person and then someone out there is going to save me, that's like ridiculous. It's that when you do the work, you do the practice, then everything you need will come. They have this saying, for example, if you really practice, the meditators in the mountains, if you really practice, the food will roll up the hill to you. And this is what the Buddhist view of karma is. If you really practice virtue, really practice morality and goodness and generosity, all these things, you don't sit there being stupid and wait for it to come, but you create all the causes to receive everything you will ever need effortlessly. So with Harry, okay, put it this way, because you're right, a Buddha is so powerful, it really is like science fiction for us in the world, infinitely powerful to manifest in countless bodies, to do countless activities to benefit countless sentient beings. But we have to create the cause to be open to that person, to even recognize them, to even hear their advice, to be helped by them. That's the dependent arising. So there was Harry, who had this incredible moment of bodhicitta, happily giving his life for 4 strangers. That intense level of incredible compassion created the cause for him to be saved and to reverse direction. Mm-hmm. Or even the story they talk, Lama's over in something I was editing recently, there's always this story, you might have heard the story about a Sangha going to meditate for years and years in the cave, and he was meditating on Maitreya. And when you're doing these deity practices, you're wanting to have a vision and to meet the Buddha. You want to see the Buddha at a subtle level, but you've got to have high realizations. And he kept giving up and giving up and giving up because he got fed up, and then he thought he'd go back again and go back again. And then he left again in despair because he couldn't get realizations, couldn't get to see Maitreya. Maitreya didn't manifest, he wasn't realized enough. And then suddenly he sees this mangy dog on the ground, and he has an incredible moment of compassion and gets down and first of all cuts his leg to let blood come so he can gently with his tongue remove the maggots from this open wound on this dog. He didn't want to even hurt the maggots, and he's got his eyes closed removing the maggots, and then he opens his eyes and the dog is Maitreya. He said, "Where have you been all these years?" "I've been there all the time," Maitreya said. "You just didn't see me." So yes, that's the point. We create the cause.
So the question I have is, it's very common in our culture and across many religions to say, ask other people to say prayers.
For you.
For me or for a family member or someone who's having a difficult time. Can you pray for?
Yes.
So how does that work? So how does that work?
That means still the same. It's like there's a doctor who can help, and I hear about your sister. So I heard about that, and then your sister's dying of cancer, and I've heard about an amazing doctor who can cure cancer, and I say, go tell her about this doctor. It's the same thing. Now, if she doesn't have the merit, she'll say, don't talk such stupid rubbish, and she'll die of her cancer. But even that kind of thing is the same. I gave her some when you passed the message on. She had the merit to hear it, so she went to the doctor and got helped. It's the same thing. So of course the Buddhas can help, any beings can help, but the person who gets helped has to have the merit to be helped. They might know they've got it, but the cause to be helped is there.
Okay, but I'm saying the prayers to myself. I mean, I'm saying the prayers for them.
But you're invoking the Buddha.
Okay.
And that person has the merit to be helped by that Buddha.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. It's time to go home, I think. Is it not? Yes, it is. So I hope it's been useful today. We've talked lots of things, had lots of stories, lots of experiences. It's been very interesting, and yesterday as well. So thank you, everybody. So we think about all this and see what makes sense and try to apply in our daily life. The bottom line is, know you're going to die, could die today, and be ready for it. And that's a really good practice if you go, what am I attached to? And you think, okay, relax, Robina, relax. Let your little butter dish go, you know, it's okay. Isn't it? That's the thing, remind. That if you do wake up in the morning, it's a bonus. So your practice tonight is when you go to sleep, first of all, see your dreams as dreams. It's a really nice practice of loosening the grip on grasping at things. As they say, see everything like an illusion, or see life like a dream. It's a really good practice to loosen the grip of being solid, you know. So have that as your practice, to imagine, make an aspiration to see your dreams as dreams. And then, and I mean it, if you wake up, and of course we believe we will wake up, if you wake up, notice it and go, wow, amazing, I'm still alive. So I'm going to hop out of bed and make the most of today. That's the attitude to have, you know. Then there's always enthusiasm, and you're always focused. You stay focused on the job to be done, because there's no time to waste. But it's not like neurotic. It's like getting ready to get to the airport. You're focused on the job to be done. You don't get distracted by dumb things, you know. So think like that, okay? And we dedicate. Jangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gu Chig, Ke Pan Yampa, Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gondu, Paba Shog. And then all these seeds we planted, every thought we've had, sow seeds, they won't go astray. So we nourish them from this moment, so that, and may they ripen in the future as our Buddhahood, as our perfection, so we can be of benefit to others. And let's just say the Lama Zopa Rinpoche's prayer, the swift return. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. These are just different levels of realizations, people with realizations. Victorious Losang and Tsongkhapa, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, and you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. All right. May numbers come back in a body that we can see and hear. Okay, precious people. Thank you so much. So kind of you. And we look forward to tomorrow, who's coming tomorrow. And keep moving, and Nana, just keep moving and kind of rejoice in your progress, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody online. We will start again tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning with the Sunday Dharma Connections with Venerable Robina. And then we'll continue this particular weekend workshop in the afternoon at 1:30 tomorrow. Thank you.